All right, everybody, we should be live here. Welcome to Paravine. This is Into the Rift. This is episode number 10, if I'm correct. So correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But we'll be getting the show off today. A couple topics to cover. It's going to be all across the pond. We have some new stuff going on in Korea, new tournament structure as well. There's going to be a couple of roster changes in North America, some in EU as well. Talk about the expansion tournaments that are coming up and any controversies related to all of that. So without further ado, let's introduce everybody. I'm Devin Pyrotechnics Young, but that's not important. The panelists here today, we're going to have Stephen Wynn, Thomas Watts, Kelsey Moser, and John Christian, who are all going to be super wonderful today. I'm sure of this. How you guys doing?
Not bad.
All right, excellent. Do you want to jump on into it? So we have, try to make sure we don't go overtime this one. So first topic, let's talk a little bit about some of the North American stuff that's going on. I mean, we can get into the expansion tournament in just a little bit, but why don't we go on some roster swaps or I guess it's not so much swaps, but maybe a few people dropping off right now, because we've already known that, Krepo is out for now off of EG. We know that, Piglet obviously confirmed in some of the off time that he's going, he's been on Curse. That's kind of been known for a while. Also about Curse, though, Voyboy just announced he's stepping down at least for this next season. So, the roster stuff is not really going to end anytime soon, it seems. And, we've got a long off season. What do you guys think of that in North America so far?
Well, I think Curse, so I'll go Curse first, just because Voyboy announced today. Mm-hmm. Curse is in a really interesting spot. I think Voyboy was somewhat overhyped as a mid laner on the Rift. But if you believe the hype, he was kind of that team's quarterback. He was kind of that team's leader. And whenever you have somebody step aside, you have to, in many ways, reorganize your team. Who's going to be the face, who's going to be the guy that the rest of the team follows. And in Voyboy's case, and in Curse's case, now we have to see who's going to replace him. I mean, yes, there's been discussions about pulling a mid laner from other teams, from other Curse, under the Curse banner teams, but that's not confirmed yet, or at least not publicly confirmed. So seeing that and seeing how that team coalesces, and then you add Piglet in, you have a whole bunch of variables. There are a whole lot of balls in the air with that team, and it's going to be real interesting to see if there's an international tournament, should Curse actually get put up any kind of result before the LCS starts.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're not the only team of that in that organization that's going to have some interesting results going forward. But sorry, Steven, I think you wanted to elaborate on that.
I was just going to say that I really kind of wish that Curse got voted in for IEM San Jose, I think. Because, especially with the Voyboy leaving, he was, like Thomas said, he was like the quarterback. This actually kind of reminds me of last year when KTB split up their roster. Like, Kakao went to Arrows, but they looked like they were in a pretty good spot because I think at the time Puma and Dew stepped down. Like, that could have been their time to shine, because Curse at the end of the split looked really solid. They looked a lot better than they did at the beginning of the season. But, Boy was leaving, new AD carry. This is just going to be a really weird transition time for them.
Yeah, I think so.
If it had gotten voted into IAM, though, I'm pretty sure Voyboy would have stayed on for that, because it's just too much stuff. Just because I almost feel like they waited until after they figured out the voting and the final rosters were announced before Voyboy made his announcement. So that's kind of my feeling on that.
Yeah, but didn't they re-sign him like last month?
Who?
Voyboy. They made that announcement. And then, well, I mean, I guess we don't know when Voyboy made the decision to leave Curse.
Yeah. I know, but I'm just saying that I feel like he wouldn't just. Maybe he would. Mm-hmm. Maybe he would just leave before IM. But I kind of think that that's something that he waited to announce that he was stepping down and streaming full time.
That's fair.
All right. Do we want to touch a little bit more on Krepo? I don't recall if you guys talked about this a little bit last week.
Well, I guess there's a lot of speculation. You can go, John.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think we discussed Krepo last week. But yeah, I guess, like, the guy's obviously been in contact with Alliance. So there was a thread on Reddit, I'm pretty sure, where he was spotted on the team speaking stuff. which obviously you could just turn around and say, oh, well, it's old friends and whatever. But I would assume there's something there. Whether or not it's in the support role, I don't know. But there could be a possibility of him coaching now that the ex-coach has went to, is it the Brazilian team?
I think it's
Keith
Keith.
Stars.
Yeah, Keith
Yeah,
Stars.
so,
Mhm.
so that would make a lot of sense for Crepo to just slot right in there, Obviously someone they respect.
Okay.
I don't know if he would want to do a coaching role because you kind of get the feeling that he would almost make more money as a personality or an analyst. I'm not heavily speculating on salary here, but right now I get the feeling that the salaries for being like an on-camera personality might be a little bit higher than analyst salaries. And then, or he could potentially, he said that the thing he really wants to do is play. So that makes me almost feel like being the coach for Alliance is something that he might not want to do. So then
Maybe
the
it'll
question
work
is,
for the first split.
would he be an upgrade on NIF, I guess, is the question you have to ask. So
Well, not only that, they have an open 80 carry spot right now that, a lot of people are saying may potentially be filled with someone like Reckless.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's kind of been an ongoing thing. And how much do you think that really plays into that if that's what the talks are about?
Well, okay, so the speculation is Crepo and Reckless being the new bot lane for Alliance. And I think that would definitely be an upgrade because I remember there being personality issues of some sort Alliance. They just kind of cruised along, but they didn't really gel really, really well as a team. And Crepo says over and over again that he and Reckless are good friends. I'm sure that Crepo is on some good base with Froggen. So if they join the team, I'm sure it'll be a much bigger upgrade.
Well, I think the thing that's important, whether it's Crepo or whoever, with Tabs, if you read his Ask FM statement a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
his major focus was it just wasn't an environment that I could thrive in. That doesn't mean that Tabs is a bad player. I'm not saying that Tabs is a bad player. I'm saying that the Alliance environment requires a specific kind of mind. Given that Crepo is a little bit older, he's been around the block in professional gaming, I would say that he would fit, but I'm not sure you can say Nif wouldn't. I will say absolutely certain that given Reckless the almost maniacal work ethic the guy has been reported to have on numerous occasions, that would fit perfectly with the sort of business-like work ethic, like working environment that Tabs described in that post.
Mhm.
So it's really interesting to look at it from that perspective.
and I do think you talked about how Reckless and Crepo are good friends. And this is something that I think is coming up a lot in this offseason is that, being good friends means that we're going to be a better team, right? But I think this is a misconception that friendship and respect
Mhm.
necessarily are mutually inclusive. Like you need to be friends to respect each other.
Mhm.
At times, I think it's almost better to just respect each other and not be friends. Like being friends, you duo queue with each other and you have a good time. You might not necessarily improve, but I think that's something that for me keeps coming up all off season, and we can talk a little bit more about it when we get to the CLG stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that necessarily them being good friends equates to a more successful bot lane than Tabs and Nif.
That's true.
Now we have. I want to steer this one a little bit back across the pond again because we kind of diverged into Europe a little bit. But keeping with the NA theme, there's definitely been a lot more stuff going on in a few other orgs. CLG announced their new top laner. It's going to be Zion Spartan. And they also have Skara, who's been apparently getting in there, mixing it up as a coach. This has already been talked about on some of the other shows that have been making rounds too. But I don't know. What do you guys think of Zion in that role with the rest of the team the way it is? It's always kind of been a big complaint that CLG's top lane, is not going to get a lot of help, and he kind of needs to do a lot of his own work to carry.
I'm in full show me mode, frankly. And what I mean by that is, great, CLG made some more changes. Did they fix some of the underlying issues that have gone public with some of their environment problems? If they haven't, you could put Looper and Faker on that team and you might not get a good result just because it's so toxic or so counterproductive. So I'm in full show me mode with CLG. It might work, it might not, but I'm certainly not going to hype them at all until it works.
And I think we get this CLG, oh, we've got this roster changeover going to be good thing like every split. And especially, I don't know, Doublelift went on his Twitter and he made the statement, I'm so happy to be playing with Zion Spartan. I feel like this year we're going to be a team of friendship and mutual respect. And I just went, ow, that hurts. Like, I don't know if he intended it to be almost a passive aggressive burn. I was just like, why go at this time to make this statement? And I think it is because they've been public about how almost there was this core friendship group with Afromoo and Link and Doublelift. And it almost seemed like a lot of people speculated that Dexter and Sarah felt a little bit isolated and a little bit not included. I don't know if this is exactly the case, but this seemed to be what they were implying. And then they're adding, so he makes that comment that, okay, we're all going friends, we're all talk about it a little bit. I'm kind of wondering if that's necessarily a good thing. Like, they get people to talk, you're able to pull out on organizations. We had Skara come on and say we didn't have a schedule, and then so said schedule. They wouldn't get up. They wouldn't do this and this. It's their strength, kind of like this group of friendship. It doesn't like me. These two problems that we're getting with. This idea that we didn't all respect each other, that their infrastructure or organization, and the players kind of took it upon themselves to be motivated or to either perform well or not, or to practice or not, and didn't really listen to any information. I don't know. I think that these are problems that might be feeding into each other here.
All right.
Wait, give it a second. The stream. I lost connection for a second. That was really weird. Okay, it's back. Sorry about that.
Yeah, cool. Hey, we're back. All right, good. So it's like a second portion too. Should I do a second intro for everybody? I had a cool thing about how Kelsey covers this mysterious second best in the world region that nobody knows anything about. I think it's called China or something. I don't know. We'll get into that a little bit later, guys. But keeping on NA. So we talked a little bit about roster stuff. We talked about how some of these new infrastructure changes as well as player influxes is maybe going to affect some of the teams, hopefully for the better for them, but we don't know, and we're a little skeptical of that. Let's talk about the teams that are hoping to make it into the LCS. There's this expansion tournament coming up. It's going to be 2 weeks coming up, 2 weekends, and then it's going to be like a 3 or 4 week break, and then straight into a big offline portion, and 2 teams out of that will make it through. Before we talk about the teams, there's this big elephant in the room, and it's the new jungle. It's going to be hitting sometime between the online and the offline portion of the tournament. I think there was just an article about this like in the last 10 minutes from Daily Dot that got released, just talking about how a lot of players are really upset about this, how they feel like they were sort of maybe misled, or the implication was not that they'd have to deal with all these jungle changes. Thomas, I think you talked a little bit about this to me earlier. Do you want to elaborate on what's going on?
Well, the big thing that's come out with the expansion tournament is the new jungle is coming, and that's it. Kind of Riot following their procedure. They want to introduce new patches, yada yada yada. But it's actually ticked off a bunch of the teams that are competing, because I got the impression from talking to several of my colleagues at the Daily Dot, that they felt like a lot of the players and the coaches felt like it was dropped on them, just out of the blue. And it's one of those things where I totally understand that. Like, Riot has a history of making a decision and then just dropping it on people and like, oh, this is actually what's going to happen. So from that perspective, I sympathize. But I think, at some point you have to, if you want to play the game, you have to understand that will happen. So I can't bash Riot too hard. I do think because of how it's timed out, because of how they're implementing the patches, it is going to be a step back in competition just because it is going to be a quick turnaround. But, at some point, the team has to come together and overcome adversity no matter what happens. So I wish that Riot would have been a little more upfront about this. At least that was the impression. And I think that's something I want to jump a little bit away from what I'm saying and just say, maybe Riot made this decision 2 months ago or whatever. Maybe they made it 2 weeks ago. I don't know Riot's timeline. I just know that the perception currently exists that this was just dropped on the teams that were participating or even potentially participating. And that to me is a big problem. Even if it was a total illusion where you say a week ago, 2 World Challenger teams, we are probably going to be implementing the new jungle in between rounds of the tournament. Okay, that gives you kind of a ramp to let people understand, okay, this is happening. I'll get my freak out of the way, and then once I play it, it'll be okay. As is, it's like, this is happening, it's happening now, and some of your tournament prep just blew up. It's like, whoa, no, that's not okay. And I think that's where a lot of the anger has come from on this issue, and that much I can understand and sympathize with.
All right. Now, I know there's going to be a reasonably long turnaround time after this has been announced. It just happens to be in the middle of the tournament. The first 2 portions of this are going to be on the 4.19 patch, the currently live patch, and nothing else is going on, no jungle changes whatsoever. But then, yeah, there's that 3-week hiatus they have, and then it's getting dropped. Supposedly, at most, it happens right after that last weekend of the online event, right? So then they have 3 weeks to prepare. Now, is the question really so much, is that enough time, or just they would have liked to have been notified earlier, even if they hadn't changed anything else?
I'd be willing to bet it's both, because this is a fairly large, fairly radical change overall. So what you're essentially, if you're thinking about strategizing, one, your jungler's basically going to have to grind the hell out of solo queue and grind the hell out of scrims to figure out what actually works now. Like what build paths do I need? And John, you'll probably be able to shed some more light on this since you've done more coaching than I have. But just the mechanics of it, you'll have to figure that out. Then you have to integrate it into a team. And I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither were some of these strategies. So I'm very from that. I think it's both. I think it's different shades of the same picture, if you will. Pyra.
Okay. Rome is one of those strategies. Also, you want to send your support up the mid lane sometimes. Okay.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Now that the pun's out of the way. Okay. So that's that makes a lot of sense. What do you other guys think about that? Really, I mean, just coming from the idea that this is sort of basically a tournament taking place on 2 completely different maps in the sense.
It has to happen. That's the thing. How long away is LCS? Was it in January or February?
I believe LCS starts at the end of January. Don't quote me on that. That's
Okay,
when
so
The
the
last 2
spring
years,
starts.
it started at the end of January. Yeah.
Right, so that's like a month away from when the tournament ends, yeah?
Yeah,
think the
roughly.
tournament
It's going to be ending in
Ends the
December.
20th. Yeah, so, I mean, you need to kind of prepare for the LCS starting, and it is season 5 that you're going into, so I can see why they're doing it. Is it ideal? No.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for these teams going in, it's not ideal. I can see the point, but they're going to be participating on this patch in a month's time anyway. So, I think it's just right. It's like, we'll get it started early,
Okay. Just happens to come at a time when they're looking to add 2 teams in. Yeah, it's a tough issue.
I can
Kelsey?
see. Oh, sorry, Kelsey first.
Oh, no worries.
I understand the point about adaptability, but I think what we're starting to see are teams with better sports staffs and better research and kind of this more preparedness succeeding in general, because these are the teams that can also approach changes in the meta more analytically. So I think it's almost kind of like we can do as much research, we can do as much prep as we wanted to, and we were doing all this prep going in. But suddenly, no matter how much prep and how much hard work we did, it's almost invalidated, and it's almost now about who is faster, which I think isn't something that necessarily is what LCS is about.
Okay.
I can kind of see 2 sides to it. one, like everyone's already kind of mentioned, the adaptability. And that does kind of make it maybe potentially interesting which team adapts faster, which team, because you're put into a situation where all teams are suddenly thrown into an even playing field. But at the same time, the change is to the jungle, and I feel the jungle quote unquote meta is too big to throw upon teams with trying to make into the LCS, because jungle meta is way too influential on the rest of the meta. For example, if you have, let's say Vi is number one jungle again, then you have the assassin mids to set up level 6 ganks or something, whatever. That is a huge change compared to previous seasons like trinkets or the addition of the white count. Right? It's just way too big of a change.
True, but how long
Yeah.
did it take people to get used to it, right?
I suppose.
Well,
And you
SK
also
Telecom
wonder-
ripped off an undefeated season because they adapted faster, and that'll
Yeah.
never get done again.
Mhm.
So, I mean, anyway, Kelsey, you were saying, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you have to wonder though. It's not even just that the jungle is suddenly changing completely. You have this beta tested jungle that you're putting on the servers, and of course, things that have been beta tested and are released on live are never perfect. They're always like huge exploitable problems, and with changes this big, the one team could find the one exploitable problem. Like, I think this is the argument that everyone makes every year when they do the expansion tournament with these large problems and with these large changes, excuse me. But it's always the fear, right? It's always kind of the idea that what if one team finds this one thing that's really, really broken and no one else does, and that team might not necessarily be able to succeed in several months when there's no longer that one big exploitable problem.
Kind of
Alright.
like Curse of the Sad Bullet Time or something back in OGN 2012.
Well, and there have been histories of bugs affecting competitive play, and it usually results in some kind of ref decision. Like I think I'm remembering a spring LCS match with Curse when Saint Vicious was still playing, when like they had some kind of ultimate bug on Annie or something. And
Yeah,
it-
the
Oh, they
Sunlit
couldn't-
fire.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
a
an
Void Boy
info.
couldn't drop a Tibbers on anyone, and that like they had to pause for like 15 minutes and sort
Mhm.
that out. I mean, these things do happen even when everything has been accounted for. So I guess there's a pretty good argument either way there. Okay, so that's the the controversy about this change incorporating itself into the tournament, but the tournament itself is got quite a lot of interesting players and quite a lot of interesting teams going into it. I mean, there's a total of 14 teams that have qualified either through prior qualification from Challenger Series and the promotion tournament that took place already, and then of course there were 12 teams, I believe, straight from the ladder. So do you guys want to get into some of the more well-known rosters there and some of the more well-known players, because there's definitely some interesting faces and some familiar ones?
Sure, should we do NA or EU first?
Yeah, let's we can do NA since we've been in that vein, and then we can hop into EU. I actually don't have as much experience there, so if you want to take the running of that afterwards. But the two teams that qualified out of North America from the Challenger Series or from the promotion tournament are fairly familiar faces, even though some of them have changed a bit. Complexity Black, which came about from the split of old Complexity, it's probably Robert and Bubba Dub. And then iKennyU and Xsmithy are joining that roster. And basically what had happened was they split off to kind of do their own thing, and then Complexity picked them back up. So they get the 3/5 rule and keep the Complexity spot. There's also a Complexity White that's West Rice and Kez, but we'll get into them later.
Mhm.
So this is an interesting team. They definitely have I think a reasonably strong amount of synergy together. But we heard that there were issues across the board with some of the members of this team when it was just Complexity in the LCS.
Well,
Hmm.
it remains to be seen. Again, I hate to keep beating this dead horse, but I'm in show me mode. It's a new team. You have to think that in 4 of the 5 cases, the LCS veteran thing will mean the team comes together and buckles down and makes the LCS, just because you kind of expect veterans to be able to do that. But aside from that, you brought it up absolutely correct, Pyrrha. Is the synergy there? Is the synergy still there? Are people still hating each other? There are so many questions that
obviously teams are not going to, the way the team will have to answer them is with their play. And that's going to be interesting to see. If they flame out early, there's your answer. If they go on to go in the LCS, same answer to the same question, but it's a different answer itself.
Mm-hmm. All right. And that's a fair point. I mean, that's a team that, has kind of a lot of history in some regards, but you're right, they're still new. A team that's been together for a while, even though they've had some changes as well, is the other team that qualified. This is Curse Academy. And a lot of people kind of put them up as the favorite, just overall, just because they've always made a strong showing. They've always been really close. They have some really familiar faces now with Cop dropping down to this roster. St. Vicious has been on it for a while. They've had Bunny Fufu. They've had Keen, and I believe now Hanser is the top laner who is on LoL Pro. So, I mean, a lot of these guys might have shuffled around, but there's still, a lot of old favorites too, and they've had a lot of practice together, and a lot of international experience too.
Well,
so
this roster, if they make it, will really put Curse in a pickle because, one, Curse will have to sell the team. The Curse organization, they can't have two teams, yada, yada, yada. But you have to feel like, in the case, since Voyboy left Curse, given Keen's performance on multiple occasions, he's been a standout performer since he got over here from Australia. You kind of have to feel like if Curse wants to stay in-house, they're going to tap Keen. But if Curse Academy makes it, what happens? That's going to be a really weird thing that goes on over the next month or so, because again, no one really knows. There has never been a situation where an LCS team, like a new potential expansion LCS team, has a mid laner under another organization. It's just like it could explode in a lot of different ways. So I think Curse Academy is in just a real interesting spot, depending on how the tournament plays out even just on an organizational level. So I'm looking forward to that personally.
Same can be said of LoL Pro as well. I mean, it's a different roster, but they're in the same boat. They have to get picked up by someone else if if they end up winning the whole thing. And a lot of people give them a lot of credit too. They're only the 6th seed, but they're also a team that's been together a while under a different banner. It used to be, I think it was Gamester Gear. Is that the right team I'm thinking of? It's Flares, ThinkCard, Usui, Wiz Fusion, and Keith McBrief. So that's the LoL Pro roster currently.
I will say something interesting, because that situation has happened in China, where there's a team that loses their mid laner, and they have another team in-house that's a B team that could potentially get into LPO. But I mean, at the time, there was sort of the rule that you do have to create a separate sub-organization. Because it's World Elite, they ended up not doing that, because World Elite can kind of get away with whatever they want. They offered him the chance. They offered Xie, when Messiah retired, the chance to be the mid laner for World Elite, and he said that he felt happier on World Elite Academy and felt like that had an opportunity to be a stronger team. He, of course, later ended up being benched from World Elite Academy for underperforming, but it's kind of
ironic.
I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, is if Keen feels like his team can succeed, or it's almost like they kind of have to give him that choice.
There is another choice. I think people also brought up Yusui, the mid laner for Team LoL Pro, as a possible replacement for Voyboy. I'm looking at the bracket for the expansion tournament, and there's a good possibility that Curse Academy makes it in and LoL Pro doesn't, because LoL Pro is in the same bracket as Coast. And if Coast beats LoL Pro, and then let's say Curse Academy makes it in, Keen can stay on Curse Academy if he likes it better, and then Yusui can move up from Team LoL Pro to Curse.
All right. Speaking of Coast, they're another team that a lot of people have given the favorite to. These guys, they in the last days of the roster lock, they made #1 challenger team. They're qualified as the 3rd seed because of that. So yeah, they still have to play that extra round. But you spoke pretty confidently there, Steven, that they'd make it through. This is definitely a roster that's had a few upgrades. You've got Jez's and Paler now on there, and yeah, I mean, what are our other panelists here? What do you guys think about? I know you're going to probably say show me, Thomas, but let's talk a little bit about Coast, because they kind of have shown up at least on the ladder, and everyone is kind of giving them a lot of lip service right now.
I assume Thomas is going to say Xiaomi as well, but I don't know. Like for Coast, Chris is a pretty good top liner. I don't have much exposure to Juzzes and Pearls as I didn't watch that much ULCS, unfortunately, at the same time as I have work. I am not a fan of their bot lane. Sheep's okay, but I don't think Mashmi is as good as people say he is. Because I don't know, like, every time I've seen him...
What are you talking about? That's a world-class bottom lane.
It's a world-class bot lane, sure. I mean, I don't know. I've never been impressed with Mashmi. I think there was only one game where he had a really impressive KDA. That was Spring Split 2013 when he was when it was called Good Game University. And honestly, you could chalk up most of his plays going big that game, where COG overcommitting and just staying there to die. I don't know. Mashmi doesn't impress me as an AD carry. So I don't. Maybe they can get there, but I'm not a Coast fan.
But he's never lost a game on Twitch. I remember that was a line once. That was a game on Twitch.
Okay. I mean, there's a couple other teams we could get into. I think those are the ones that pretty much everybody knows about. There's a couple of dark horses. You've got Enemy Esports. They kind of came right behind Coast in qualifying. We talked a little about Lol Pro. There's everyone's been hearing about Fusion. MacNoon is he's arrived. He's been playing a lot with the team. What are you guys' takes on Fusion? Because they have an incredible PR machine so far for a team that literally has not competed yet.
Well, the PR machine makes them sound like shoe-ins. And MacNoon was a solid player. Okay, I don't know how he is in a team anymore. He was a great Korean solo queue player though, so there's got to count for something there. It's a synergy question with them, and the downside of their PR machine is that now these guys have to back it up, and they obviously have not been together very long. So it's a pretty veteran team, but you are putting that whole organization into a pressure cooker pretty quick.
Yeah, that's a good point. But a lot of these guys have been under a lot of pressure too, and on a number of different teams. I mean, having the end coming back, going to AD carry, something that I believe he stated he was more comfortable with in the first place. Glebe specifically said he had not really wanted to be on that starting roster on TSM because of the fact that he didn't like the spotlight. That kind of is a weird duality there. I don't know much about Hui. I can't really speak to that. And then Nintendo's kind of like been the career in out of challengers, so he's been around for a while, and I'm sure he's used to that kind of pressure for sure.
I think we kind of talked about Fusion on the last show a little bit. I'll say this about Nintendo. Okay? I was harsh on him last time. My opinion of him hasn't really changed, but I'll say this: Nintendo has been the person to bring out niche picks, really unique picks that have thrown teams off balance. He kind of invented the Tink Fiddlesticks that kind of crushed a few teams back in OCS, and he, I think, was the first or second pro to start playing Elise as a jungler, and that took off. So with the new season, Nintendo has, to me, a really good opportunity and chance to bring out the unique jungler that it's going to throw everyone off balance. So this is his time to redeem himself, to me.
All right. Cool. Well, sorry, you go ahead, Kelsey. Oh, no, you're fine. While she's off for just a second, we'll go and shift over into Europe if you guys would like. I don't know as much about the challenger teams that are over there. If anyone wants to take the lead on this one, I do know that we're gonna have Millennium vying for spot, I believe, now that they've got Horo and Ryu in there. That's been kind of talked up. I think you've got Ocelot's team. Gamers 2 is going to be in it. SK Prime, H2K, and I can't remember a lot of the other teams competing. I'm sure Ninjas in Pajamas has a roster. I don't know what it is though. Anybody want to take a charge on that one?
There's a lot of new faces coming into the challenger scene. Basically, all the top teams have replaced people. H2K have replaced the support and the jungle. Obviously, Millennium have brought in the 2 Koreans. Gamers 2 have recently changed their support. And obviously, there's a few other teams coming through into the expansion tournament. You know, I think it's a Copenhagen Wolves X lineup is playing in it as well.
Let me confirm that. You go ahead.
Unlucky Rejects or something they're called. With Freeze is playing Eddie Carey, the ex-Nip.
Oh, okay.
I think Copenhagen Wolves just released the roster, so they had to qualify through the ladder, you know.
Yeah, I thought North America had some roster instability, but it is pretty difficult to track that in the off season because you do see a lot of this shuffling happen almost immediately.
Well, this is going by what I've seen on like Twitter and stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they're not under their usual names, so I guess you wouldn't know unless it had been brought out. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, there's quite a lot of teams that could, you know, potentially take it, and I guess it depends how these bigger teams like HDK and Gamers to how they perform with the new members.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a hope for the EU expansion tournament, and again, I'm kind of a Korea guy. I did Korea for Lolly Sports for a while, then they moved me to Europe. But I hope that Ryu and Horo coming into Millennium can break Europe out of some of this metagame stagnation that has plagued the entire region throughout. I mean, you can argue throughout the 2014 season. You can't really just farm for 20. You can't stare at each other angrily across the rift and stare at each other for 20 minutes and farm. You just no. It generally will not work. And there is a disturbing trend in Europe where they freeze up, and that's what they default to. And I hope bringing in some of the foreign talent breaks the region out of that, like forces teams to realize, oh, you know, we try and do that, we get crushed. And I hope that changes, because that's not just good for the game. It's good for the region. You know, you want to see, ideally, I would be willing to bet Riot wants to see an Alliance or a Fnatic come in and do well at Worlds, and a TSM and a Cloud9. Well, when you can't do that, when your metagame has stagnated pretty hardcore, you're just going to fall further and further behind. And it's not a winning philosophy, in my opinion. So I hope that changes, and I hope we'll get to see some of that in the expansion tournament.
You know what Europe really needs, Thomas? They need like an LSPL or a low-ranking LPL team to come over there and show them how to team play. LMQ, but maybe a little bit better. Kelsey, you know what I'm talking about.
Make them play a little bit faster than they currently do.
More. So you can't get like 40, 50 minutes. Although North America holds the record for the longest, professional match played. So maybe I'm talking out of my behind here, but
well, at least they end their laning phase at some point.
That's true. It's very true. And I know what you're saying. I completely agree with you. I hope Horo and Ryu can make that happen. I mean, they're not exactly the top tier Koreans that we see migrating to other places, or supposedly migrating to other places, but they're still from a region that is much more proactive about the game. And, if Millennium does make it in, that kind of ends up sending that message that you have to watch out for these guys to a degree. I mean, look at what LMQ did. They were a very lower ranked Chinese team and came in and pretty much wrecked North America for about 4 or 5 weeks before everyone caught on. And this was in the LCS, because they spent a whole year wrecking the challenger scene.
I don't know if the situation is necessarily comparable. I am really interested in seeing how Ryu and Horo do, just because I think this is an experiment that EU is kind of taking to tentatively. So if it is successful, then we could see more Korean imports, which I think would be fun to see for the region. Just kind of change things a little bit. I don't like, again, their meta isn't necessarily evil or bad. It just, they need more variety, especially after what we saw at Worlds. They didn't get out of groups. Wasn't necessarily saying that EU is like worse, but they want to find a way to improve.
All right. So actually, this is something I wanted to touch on as well, or at least move into, because we talked about the Koreans coming over, and about how a lot of them in general have been kind of vacating Korea. But today, or rather, it was a little bit ago, it was, I think about a day or two ago, we got a finalized 2015 Korean LoL Esports reform plan. This was all written up. I believe Travis and Nilu collaborated to make a really nice article on Gamers about it. This is a joint announcement by Kespa, Riot, and on GameNet. So like this is like the super official legit version, and they're talking about like all the stuff that's going on. So the format, which is basically the LCS, it's a spring. It's going to start in January or February. There's no more OGN winter. Sorry. There's a minimum salary, which it's not a lot, but it's akin to what the minimum salary is in North America. So it's basically kind of enforcing those same LCS Riot rules on Kespa, and on GameNet seem okay with this. Now, there was a lot of complaints that it was going to be like a diluted thing because of it. But do you guys, having read this over, do you guys think this is like much more reasonable altogether? If you have seen this,
Well, reasonable way to run a region.
or to change a region, because the whole argument was that they're bringing this in line with how everything else works, and it should make it more competitive. Obviously, there's less teams, and this is why a lot of players are missing out now. But at the same time, will these like 8 and then eventually 10 teams be more competitive than they already were?
I think you're still going to have the 800-pound gorillas in the room for organizations that have been around the block, that know how to build successful teams. And for lack of, to be rather pithy with it, SK Telecom still has Faker. And with the brain drain in Korea, you kind of have to feel like SK Telecom is going to be a leg up over everybody for at least the foreseeable future. But we'll see. It's tough for me to believe that because they've kind of centralized it, but still kind of given a chance for amateur teams to come up, that you're going to see an amateur team compete against the big boys. It never happened in OGN, that's for damn sure. And what was it? The one team that's pulled a game off? Big File Miracle almost won one. Gasp. That's the highlight of amateur. I put in air quotes teams in OGN.
This does give more. There is a challenger scene that they're creating with this as well. That's going to supposedly feed in. There's a promotion tournament just like there is in LCS. And what did they have before? If you weren't one of those 16 OGN teams, you had NLB. Oh wait, no, you don't. So the argument is it better or worse for those teams now? Yeah, I agree. They probably are going to have less of a chance, even with the amount of talent leaving. They're going to have less of a chance to get into that higher end league, but it seems like there's still a viable career path, even if they don't quite make it there. But I want to ask, one of the other panelists, what do you guys think about, just an individual Korean pro player or an up and coming Korean pro player's chances to make it under this new system versus what was OGN of last year?
I don't think it's better. I guess you could argue that a lot, since all of this talent is leaving, I will be surprised that if a single Samsung player is still in Korea, then they have to fill these seats, they have to fill these spots. And you kind of have the situation where you can almost envision this perpetual farm system where the players go off to China when they're done. But I don't know. I feel like with fewer roster spots, at least having it, maybe not so much for the individual amateurs, since there will be free seats. And entire organizations are losing all of their players. But if you're a rising organization, I think you have very little chance of getting in. You have very little chance of kind of making it into the big league, and I feel like if there's less incentive to sort of compete with Kespa, and I guess in general there hasn't really ever been this incentive, and to try to break in, quote unquote, then it's not good for the individual player either. So
Okay.
Out of curiosity, I know they're giving 6 seated spots to Samsung, KT, Najum, CGN, to SKT, and Jenner. Are there any other big names out of those 6 that I'm forgetting?
Well, Incredible Miracles still
Incredible.
in kind of that weird state of flux.
MVP,
but-
I guess?
maybe if they want to get into a team. You have the Prime, the Prime organization.
We have
Yeah.
Alienware Arena was there like once or something.
Yeah, but I think
Probably.
Alienware released their team.
You
I
have,
don't think they're all.
I'm not
you have a
familiar.
number of other esports organizations that at one time or another had sponsored league guys, but that are mostly doing other esports at this point that could potentially get interested. I'm talking like Startail, I think, is a fairly big one, and they just had they currently have the StarCraft World Champion. Let's see, who else am I thinking of? There's other foreign interests that could be that could try to get something going. Could see something crazy like Team Liquid picking up a team. Who knows? Fingers crossed on that.
I
One
was
thing
just
that
trying to
could
think.
be interesting. Yeah, one thing that could be interesting with all the Korean reorganization is part of what was said in that On Gamers piece that was translated is there is now a minimum salary, and part of that would be supported by Riot Korea. So whereas the entry, the barrier to the top level was in many cases monetarily based. I mean, it's not cheap to do what Samsung did this past year or SKT. It's not chump change. You can sort of subsidize teams and build them. It's just then, like Kelsey said, at what point does building the team turn into building a Chinese farm system? Because I think if the Chinese bubble doesn't pop, Korea is headed straight for, oh, you did great. It's exactly like what Zenix Storm would do for years. Oh, Zenix Storm has XYZ great player. Suddenly he's KT XYZ great player. Suddenly he's SKT XYZ great player. So you're just telling them they have to move internationally. It depends on when the Chinese bubble pops as to whether that ever really comes to fruition. But the Riot subsidy could help there. That is something worth thinking about.
There are a massive amount of questions that you unleashed implicitly with that one, but
That's
I
my job.
want to talk about China a little bit later because we have Kelsey, and that has to happen. It'd be sacrilegious otherwise, but still about Korea and the system that's now in place there. There is that mandatory contract term. They got to keep these guys for a year. There's that minimum salary. It's not much. It's about $18,000 USD. But still, is that kind of incentive really going to be enough to keep some of the obviously fakers staying, but some of the really good talent that is still there to keep them from being sucked away into either all of that Chinese revenue to either teams or streaming, or to be potentially picked up by a fairly well-off North American or European team?
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, you're going to have a lot of players go to China or other countries for more money. But because of the region locking, you can't have that many players leaving at one time anyway. So they're going to have to stay in Korea if they want to keep competing and then try and make it big there with like prize money or something, or streaming revenue if they're allowed to for now.
Because of limited slots, I think, and this might change with 10 teams instead of 8, so in the future, there is not really an incentive, again, to make a new organization, and because of that, I think that the minimum salary is actually a bad thing, because then there's not really an incentive to try to pay your players more to keep them from going to other Korean organizations. And if they're going out of the country, you don't really have to deal with them so much. You can just like have more amateur teams. So going out of the country is almost like, okay, not my problem anymore. But if you're worried about maybe a player wanting to sign a contract with another organization, and a new organization forming up to try to compete with KESPA, something like that, then obviously you have to might want to worry a little bit more about salary. But I think if there's like this instilled Riot minimum of $18,000 or whatever it is, then it's almost like, okay, that's good. That's good enough, right? That's the minimum. I don't know. That's what kind of worries me about the monetary element, at least.
Okay.
But obviously, it's probably more than they were getting paid. So, golf clap.
All right. We're going to run a little short on time because I do want to get into questions eventually, but now we will come to the point that I really wanted you here, Kelsey, for. So we're going to talk a little bit about China and we talked roster swaps earlier. We'll go a little bit more into that. Anything that's, rumored, it's pretty much seems like there's just rumors. So there's a lot flying around right now about players that are currently there that are going other places. There's the streaming revenue that's being touted around. We talked a little bit, I think, at one point about Tao Mei making what was like $800,000 a year off of streaming, and he's not even the most popular player in the world. He's just really close. So let's go with the roster stuff first. The big one, I think, was EDG Deft is, it's not confirmed, right? But it sounded like it's pretty likely.
I mean, he went on his Twitter and said, "Now I'm EDG Deft."
Yeah, I mean,
So,
so confirmed by
alright.
him, but
The organizations, and of course, Deft probably doesn't realize he's in China. And at any moment, he could get bought by someone else, and then China doesn't care because they'll just pay the poaching fine installed by Ace. So he probably doesn't realize that that could happen to him at any moment. But for now, he is EDG Deft.
and does that mean Name is, I
But
doubt
the
he's going to
transfer
the
season does end at December 5th. So that's that one respite. Like, teams can't really make transfers after December 5th. What about Name was the question?
Yeah, because if Deft is going to be on EDG,
So the other component about the Deft thing is that Pawn is more or less confirmed. He didn't verbally come out and say, I'm joining EDG. But, I mean, it's been said on forums in China by people close to the organization. The organization hasn't made an official announcement. Pawn has been dueling with Deft really, really frequently on an EDG account. So, like, the thing you need to know about Chinese players is that they have a lot of Smurf accounts. Like Wei Xiao at one point was reputed to have 50 Smurf accounts, at least, that people know about, so that he could play whenever he wanted on these Smurf accounts. No one would know.
until
But they
found out.
just, they more or less just let him use like these Smurf accounts for a while. And they're playing on EDG Smurf accounts. And so that's why there's that connection. So the question then becomes, what about you and Name, the Chinese EDG members? Where are they going? And the prevailing rumor right now, or originally, was that Name and you were made as a trade for EDG Deft because supposedly someone saw OMG picking Deft up, like OMG's manager picking Deft up from the airport. So the thought was that OMG bought Deft and wanted Name, so they would make that swap. So they would, and assuming that Cool is leaving, because Cool said that he hasn't re-signed with OMG. So that's kind of the idea behind that big rumor. The issue is that there's no sign of Name and you leaving yet. So the question is, are EDG F going to receive Deft and Pawn? In that case, Baimei, the Korean player, and Mouse. I forget what Mouse's previous name. Oh yeah, it was. I can't pronounce it because it's like that. It's got like 2 Ks, and I'm a terrible person. Kiss left would have to leave the roster because they're currently on EDGF. So
Okay.
there's the 2 Korean player rule. So that's kind of the situation.
Okay. So that's that one. I mean, there's a bunch of other ones that were kind of flying around. Let me see if I can recall a couple of the other roster rumors. It's really hard to keep things straight. So you mentioned a little bit about OMG being tangled up in this one. That bot lane, do we know what's happening with Cloud? Because they kind of, it seemed like they were going to axe him. They made some interesting changes when they played in the NVIDIA tournament recently with going on the AD carry.
So the first thing I want people to know about going 80 carry is that it's not going to happen.
Okay,
Actually,
that's a relief.
it'll probably happen now. And
Now that you said it.
Now that I've said it's not going to happen. Yeah, it was just, China is one of the reasons I like to watch LPL is that they're willing to try stuff out and see if it's a disaster, and a lot of times it is. But he's probably going to move back top, and if they do get Name, obviously he's going to go to the 80 carry position. But yeah, so that's the question. The other thing is that because people thought that Deft was going to go to OMG for a while, And Deft and Cloud are kind of buddies, and they have the same login name in the Korean solo queue server because Deft is this amazing interregional PR machine, and he changed his solo queue login name to be the same as Cloud's after Cloud told him what his was, because he's so cute that way. But yeah, so they get along really well. So the question was, okay, are they going to keep Cloud? Because the two supports that they picked up to try out temporarily have already left the organization. So the prevailing theory is that they will keep Cloud on the main roster. I'm not sure. They still have a lot of people who could play support, and they have shown in the past that they're not shy about picking up new supports. So,
okay. We could go into the rabbit hole that is LSPL qualifiers and teams coming up to the LPL as well, but I think we've kind of gotten the message on that one. Obviously, there's a few people to speculate on too. I think Dade is not confirmed on a team. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what the rumors were around him. I know that Cloud9 of all people were looking to pick him up, but that fell through.
Yeah, there's several rumors on Dade.
Yeah. Let's I mean, if you guys want to, vent your opinions about some of that stuff before we get into Q&A. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't think there was much to say because they think that Daily Duppy just said that he was in talks with Cloud9 and then China offered him more money, but there was nothing confirmed about where he's going. So
yeah, it's not going to be the King. FYI, I don't think King is pretty much confirmed to not pick up Koreans. So
wasn't there a big rumor about LGD potentially picking up people as well? But then that.
Yeah, LGD is probably going to get some people. The new rumor that was on Inside Chinese Law today was that Imp is going to LGD.
Ah, okay.
Yes, so that's, for me, I always feel weird about it because XQ is like this rising solo queue talent. People who follow Korea know OQ, or not solo queue, rising new talent, know OQ, who's everyone is saying going to be good. It's kind of like a big feeling about XQ. And so to replace him with Imp feels a little bit sad to me, but just because you have to think how much money are they paying, and because in China it's all about the signing bonuses. So they're already paying these salaries to these players that are pretty high because the Chinese players do receive high salaries, but then they're paying these huge signing bonuses because everyone in China wants the big signing bonuses. So why are they paying these Koreans these enormous signing bonuses like Deft, Name, that thing? Deft and Name are more or less the same player. Like, I will say that right now. And everyone is going to say, oh, but Name had a terrible world showing. They more or less play very similarly. Statistically, Name has had stronger laning phases in LPL. But otherwise, they're more or less the same player. So the question is, why are you paying that huge signing bonus when you already have a Chinese version of the player who speaks the same language? But I don't know.
Okay. So then let's go ahead and move into Q&A because I've been promising it, but I hadn't delivered it. So we have some questions from kind of all around where we were in this conversation today. And I think there's one really particular one about the EU expansion. And Thomas, I want to give this one to you. It's about Giants and Tricked Esports. So that's kind of, those are two of the, I think, the lower seeded teams in the EU expansion. I don't know too much about them. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on what people think about them?
Well, I've been frantically looking up the rosters to try and answer the question in chat, and I've had to cover EU Challenger, and I do not recognize a single person on the current active Giant Gaming roster.
So they're
now,
like out of the blue.
Pretty out of the blue, and I will admit that I might have missed something. I've been sucked into other pursuits. I also cover college football, so I've been doing that as well. But I was taken a little aback when I saw their roster. But I mean, they made it, and they obviously surged at the end to bump off the number one team whose name has escaped me, Platin Rush, who dropped out. So they had to do something right there. But
okay.
I think, John, do you have any more on Giants? Because I know you're the EU guy more than anything.
Is your
I think he's
mic
Oh,
Oh,
muted?
sorry,
I was
my,
gonna say, it
my
sounds like
mic
no.
was muted. Giants, I suppose you can remember them. They were in, I think, the very first LCS season. They were
Right.
the Spanish team. It was. Oh, I try to think back to who it was, but it's the same organisation, obviously. I think one of the guys, the support that just left Gamers 2 has joined them, Rydell.
Okay.
2 seconds, I'm just going to bring up the roster. Okay. Yeah, I think Rydell's joined them. Other than him, I can't recognise anyone on the team. They're probably just Spanish players that have gone under the radar as such. But, you know, these sort of teams form now and then, you know, where you'll get like a full Danish or a full Spanish in this instance, or a full French team that just crop up.
All right. I think there was the question also had something about Platin Rush, and Thomas, you mentioned that they dropped out, but they were like number one, and then they literally went to like the lowest rank they could be to not drop out, and then they went one below that, so they kind of had this like crazy fall from grace, for lack of a better term. Let me see if I can pull up the question just very specifically what they were asking about that. I think it had to do with I guess just generally what is that something that's normal? Is that something that like, oh, we should just expect it's EU Challenger? Or is it just like crazy that happened, that a team could go from like being the first seed into this expansion tournament to not qualifying?
Well, I think it's just, I guess it kind of underscores how competitive it was with people wanting to try and get in. I don't have the team profile put up in front of me. I apologize. And I think we've lost Kelsey. She actually had she had a real life, she had a hashtag real job thing to do, so she probably will not be with us anymore. But it underscores how competitive the thing it is, and it kind of makes you feel pretty good about the expansion tournament, even with the adversity that we talked about for the first 25 minutes. It's unfortunate for the group, but I don't have much more on that. Otherwise, to be like, that sucks, and that's really crappy to say, but I don't have any, since they didn't compete, since they didn't qualify. I haven't kept up with them very much.
Okay. Well, let's move on to another one, because we've got a little bit more to go about Challenger teams in general. And this one was actually directed at you, Thomas. Is there any teams in either Challenger series that you don't think are show me teams, that have already paid their dues and you just expect them to do absolutely fine?
Well, I don't expect Coast to do anything because I have no faith in their management. So that's not really a show me team.
Okay.
But
that's like a lower blow, though.
Yes.
No, you've got the teams under the Curse banner. They've been around. They've been there.
Even
but it is a lot. Well, okay. Those organizations have not as many questions that I've seen with a CLG. Give me one in CLG's case, just to expand on what I mean. I've heard this before. Show me. I think with Curse Academy, LoL Pro, it's like, all right, they're pretty good. Do I think they're the best? No, but if it's a show me team in that sense, it's like, take the step from good to great. That would be my kind of my asterisk to that. Is it show me or not?
Okay. Then I'll go with the last question here. So we can wrap this one up, but this one was kind of a big, broad one, and I want to direct it at this point to either Steven or John. You guys can take this one since you guys have kind of been marginalized this time, and I'm sorry, I feel bad, so I want to allow everyone to have some equal airtime. But this
I talked a
is
lot in the first half of the show compared to any other show.
Okay, well, we'll move it around a little bit. We can give this to John then if you want. But the big question, and you guys can both talk about it, is there any incentive for a Western, so this is North American or European, or to try and make it into that 2 expansion phase of the Korean scene, which will happen between the spring and the summer? It wouldn't be the first time it's happened. I just want to preface it with that.
No,
No.
I don't think so. Plain and simple. What is that again for them?
Yeah. What would be the advantage, if anything, for them to try that versus getting in? If this is an LCS worthy team in either region, yeah, I mean, it's going to be crazy competitive for them regardless. But they're not. It's not like a Western team has never done this. CLG competed.
It's going to be hard enough for up and coming Koreans. Like it could be top of challenger teams, top of the ladder or whatever. It's going to be tough enough for them. Never mind a European or a North American team going over. So it wouldn't make any sense,
Yeah. Okay, and I think that's a pretty fair point. Do you guys have any differing opinions on that?
I don't think there's a single advantage to trying to get into Korea versus the LCS because, well, first of all, it's arguably easier in NA and EU, and second of all, the expansion thing. No, not the expansion, but the last 2 slots that qualifying tournament for Korea is in like 2 weeks. If they want, like, do you really want to risk everything on Korea, or do you want to take the easier route and go to NAU? I mean,
yeah.
No.
I know what you're saying. I agree with you guys too. I wish we had a little more to say on that, but I'm kind of in agreement.
It's a path of least resistance problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, there are teams that are already in LCS that maybe they want to consider that, but I think I'm inclined to agree that it seems like a lot of the Koreans are coming to you. You don't need to go to Korea.
I think.
Oh, Kelsey's back.
Sorry.
She is back, but
she's a cat. Though,
she's a cat right now, so I'll just
for the time
Can you
being.
hear me?
Yeah, we just need you to get the video on if you can.
There's just a
I
huge
have
cat on the stream right now.
yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Oh, it does.
I mean, I'm okay with that. It was just a little confusing for the viewers.
Insert comment,
So my feeling, it's really interesting because when you think about China and it's the land of opportunity for Koreans, right? But when there was the invitation sent to the Chinese teams to join the qualifier for OGN, if it would happen, so that if you guys can remember back that far, that was an interview sent out before they decided that there was going to be a huge restructuring and all the shit hit the fan. Apparently 7 of the 8 LPL teams said that they would like to go to the qualifier. So not even be guaranteed to go to OGN Winter, not even guaranteed to do well in OGN Winter if they got in, and they wanted to go, knowing that they wouldn't be able to go. And they knew the invitation was for spring and not winter. Knowing that they probably wouldn't be able to go back to LPL summer and then go to Worlds and pretty much forfeit their shot at Worlds. A lot of them wanted to do it because, and it kind of makes some sense because knowing how high the salaries are in China and knowing how much relative to the salaries they can get for having streaming contracts, if they are really, really strong, really successful pros, they want to compete in LPL because they want to be the best rather than making a lot of money. So obviously you put your money, if there's an invitation like that, you put your money where your mouth is and you try to go to Korea. But that said, the chances of doing well in Korea and getting into Korea leagues just declined a lot for something like that to happen. So.
Okay. All right. So I think we got one more question, and I'm trying to find it right now because people were. Oh yeah, it was actually one directed at John. So this is about the EU Nordic East ladder. And if there's any team there that has a chance of getting into the LCS. So if you can, John, refresh me on the teams that are going to be in the expansion tournament from the Nordic region.
I have no idea. I didn't even realize they were getting involved still.
Oh, okay. I guess that was a quick question then.
Traditionally, Nordic East was always a region that the weaker teams who couldn't make it into the West qualifier would go and play. So say you couldn't make top 10 for whatever the old LCS expansion tournament, or not expansion, just the qualification tournaments where you would go and play in Nordic East, and you would get your spot through that server. So
oh, I see. So they would invite a number of people from each server, but if you
it was like 5 from West and 5 from East.
That's kind of crazy. That's like that's like if you can't be like a top 4 Premier League team, you go to, I don't know,
You go.
You go to
Scotland.
like Ukraine or something, yeah, and then you make it in via there.
Yeah, the Champions League is like similar, I guess.
Well, I don't think I think there's definitely a certain amount of region locking for that, but I guess in theory you could recruit a whole team from another region if you had the money for it. But
Mhm.
yeah, that is a little strange. So this is a little bit different. Hey, Kelsey's not back on camera too. We got her.
Yay.
Okay. So you don't really think that, that's
No,
going
I
to change?
doubt. I don't know the teams right, so it's kind of harsh to say, but by what I've seen in the past, there won't be any Nordic East team qualifying for the LCS. I can say that much.
All right. So on that definitive note, we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. I just want to be extremely thankful to Paravine for having me here to guest. I want to thank the wonderful panelists, Stephen, Thomas, John, all the usual suspects, of course, and for Kelsey Moser, our resident China expert at everywhere on the internet. If you're talking about Chinese LOL, she's probably behind it. But
It's like a bat signal.
Yeah.
Say
Yeah.
China 3 times and she will appear in your chat room.
in a
Well,
cloud
that's
of dust.
Beetlejuice, but yeah.
The difference is it's a positive experience. So yeah, thanks again, everybody. And thanks for watching and sending questions. Again, you can go ahead and keep doing that as well. And a big thanks to Paravine for hosting this, Hitbox TV for making it possible. Guys, thank you. And we will see you next time. GG and good night.
So.